Hello everyone, welcome to day 66 of our DevOps series. And today I'll be looking at something that is very important to the whole Terraform structure. And it is something that if you're working with Terraform, you have to really be familiar with. Now, I think in the first or the second day of this particular phase of our journey, I mentioned that the way Terraform works is that Terraform compares what is defined in the block of code and what is actually in your your cloud provider like your Azure, your AWS, and all of that. Now, how exactly does it do that? I think maybe I mentioned, maybe I did not mention it. It does that through a file called state file. So there's something called Terraform State File, and that is what I'm going to majorly focus on today, and then we'll see um, how we can, what we can learn about state files and how best for us to work with state files. So basically, when you on this on my VS Code, you will see this place called terraform.tfstate. So this is the most important file in Terraform because this is the file that helps you track everything that you are doing. This is the file that helps Terraform remember that this is the way the structure is, or this is the way your environment is, and then this is how you want it to be. Basically, this is the file that enables Terraform to keep track of your environment, helps you to compare the desired state and the actual state of your environment. So it also has backup. Backup is more detailed than the main TF does because everything you do is actually backed up, and that is the way Terraform works. So in a few minutes, we are going to look into the state file and then we'll look into how best to work with state file. So now this particular terraform.cf state file is actually on my local PC. And in an ideal environment, in a production environment, you're not working alone. You're working with a team of DevOps engineers. So one of the best practices when it comes to state file is instead of using your local PC, you're having a state file on your local PC, you can have it on a you can create a remote backend, right? So you create a remote backend where your state file is remotely on maybe Azure or maybe AWS or GCP, and then whatever you do, there's a way you call that backend in your code. That's what we are going to do today. So, like I said, this state file is like the most important part of your Terraform folder structure or your Terraform file structure. Once this state file is missing, there's basically Terraform cannot remember anything. It's like you're wiping Terraform's memory. So what we are going to focus on today is how to create a remote backend. So instead of having your state file on your local PC, we are going to create a remote backend on Azure where we can reference that remote backend. We can reference that remote backend on our PC and then we'll see how we can actually work with it. So for us to for different cloud providers offer different solutions for us to use to create a remote backend. For AWS, it's very one of the most popular ones, which is S3 buckets, is used for remote backend, and then use DynamoDB for state locking. And for AWS, you actually need to do your state locking separately. But Azure and GCP, the state lock comes default with the two. For Azure backend, use Azure Blob storage, and for GCP, use GCP storage account. So we are going to create an Azure Blob storage. We are going to create a container in it, which we are going to use as our remote backend. So um, without wasting much time, this is not supposed to be a long video. I'm just going to we are going to use the CLI to create. Now we are going to create a separate resource group for this. We'll create a separate resource group. We'll create a storage account and then we'll create a blob container, right? So once we have done that, then we'll just do maybe a small, probably we'll just create maybe a resource group and storage account again. That's different. It's different from the one we are creating. The first resource group and storage account we'll be creating is for our remote backend, while the second one is just in our main.cf, which we are going to use to test what we have actually been working with. So um, let me I've created another of this. So let me let me open the terminal. use WSL. So first thing we're going to do is we'll create a storage account. We'll create a resource group. We'll create storage account, and then we'll create a container. So I already have that here. So we are going to use the CLI so that it's fast. Let me just copy everything. I'm just going to paste. So I'm creating a resource group called tfstate rg. I'm creating a storage account called terra storage 066. And then I'm creating a container named tfstate. So let's get all of this done, and then we'll proceed to see how we can get everything sorted out. So it's going to create, I believe it's creating those resources that we've defined. Okay, so our resource group has been created. It's showing succeeded. So it will go ahead and create the storage account, and then it will create the container. So let me go to my browser. Let me refresh. If I refresh this, I'm supposed to see a resource group, another resource group. Let me refresh this. So let's wait and see. Okay, it's not yet done. Okay, it's still creating. Let's wait for it to create completely. Let's wait for it to create completely, and then we'll see. We'll confirm it on our portal. Okay, so we've created everything using the CLI, and if we come to our portal, you can see it here, TS state. When I click on TS state, I'm supposed to see a storage account. So we have a storage account, Terra storage 066, and if I go into the storage account, I'm going to see a container. So let me do storage browser, and I'll check on blob containers because we created a container. So in the container, I'm supposed to see TS state. So we created the resource group storage account and the container. So now let's now get it started. Let's see. So what I'm going to do is that I'll create a simple, just a main.tf. I'll create a main.tf that creates a storage account. I told you we create another storage account, but this is just like to test the remote backend. So when I come here, so I already have my storage account. I'll just copy it here and I'll paste. So I'm creating resource group example. Let me see the name. Backend. Let me see. TF state. No. Okay, let me do test RG in West Europe, and storage account name is my Vetrax storage. Okay, so yes, so this is simple like this. So I'll save it. But remember, we still have to. This is a new folder. It's a new file. We still have to do our providers.tf. So we need to go and get our Azure provider.tf, and then we'll add that to it. So let me delete this. Okay, Azure provider. So let's get provider.tf. Or we can just go to the other place and copy. Let me just go to the other one. Let me just come to my provider.tf and just come here and I'll just copy it. So I'll copy it and then I'll come here and paste. Okay. So I've initialized I've completed my provider.tf. So now how do we reference that backend, because if I go ahead and run Terraform init, it will create everything locally. So how do we, you know, reference our backend, our remote backend into our code such that Azure will create, Terraform will create the TF-State backend, that's the remote backend on our Azure storage account. That's the blob storage that we have created. So how do we reference it? Let's go to, let's go and search, um, let's search Azure Terraform, Azure Backend Terraform, Azure Backend Terraform. So you can click on this from Ashikop and let's see. Okay, so now this is, let's see. I want something basic. I want something basic. I want something basic. Let me check this. Okay, so store Terraform storage in Azure storage. Okay, this is what you do first. You create, that's, you're creating the resource group, you're creating the storage account, you're creating the blob container. So, um, okay, good. So now this is it. We need this block of code. Backend, we create a backend with Azure RM and then reference the resource group, the storage account name, the container name, and the key. So I'm just going to copy this, and they've even showed us where I'm going to put it. So I'll go to this place, and it's supposed to be, I think, let me see, let me confirm this again. Okay, right underneath version, version. Okay, okay, okay. So we have our backend. So we're going to change this. The resource group name that we created is tfstate, tfstate rg. Then let me get the storage account. Can't remember it. So we have, let's go into resource group. So tfstate rg is our resource group name. And our container name is Terra Storage 066. Our storage account name rather is Terra Storage 066. So I'm just going to copy this. Now paste this here. So the container name, let me get that again. Storage browser and blob containers. So the container name is just tf state. Okay, tf state. Okay, tf state. Then this key. So I'm just going to put demo dot terraform dot tfstate. So the key means what is the name of the, what is the name you want to give the file? Because when you come here, we have terraform.tfstate. Here it is showing terraform.tfstate. So, but you, in a production environment, you might want to differentiate because different, you might have more than one, what do you call it, more than one state. So you want, maybe if you're in a dev environment, you want to have dev.terraform.tfstate. If you're in a staging environment, you want to have for staging. In a production environment, you want to have for prod. So you can just name it however you want to name it. So I'm going to give it demo.terraform.tfstate. So this is all that we have to provide, and I'm just going to save this. We are creating a resource group and a storage account, but we are storing the state in a remote backend. So I'm just going to do Terraform init to initialize, because this is a new setup. So let's initialize it. So it's initializing the backend. It's going to connect to that remote backend. It's going to connect. So it's giving an error. Retrieving storage account, blah blah blah. Resource group not found. TF state resource TF state ROG could not be found. Let me see. TF state ROG. Let me see the resource group. Oh, okay. It's underscore, not TF state underscore ROG. Let's save this. We are run again. So it's going to try and connect. So that's what it's trying to do. It will initialize everything, and then it will connect to the backend. Notice if you run Terraform init, the first thing you see is initializing the backend. So now we have changed the backend to our storage account or our blob container on Azure. So that is what it's going to be using going forward. And you can see successfully configured the backend Azure ROM. Terraform will automatically use this backend unless backend configuration changes. So it's already using the backend that we have configured. So that is basically how you use um, a remote backend. And the reason why you need remote backend is, like I said, you're not the only one that will be working on the infrastructure. You might be working with other DevOps engineers, so, and everybody wants to use the same remote backend. One of the ideal things about remote backend is that there's something called a state lock. There's something called state locking. State locking means that once it doesn't allow two persons to to work on the file at the same time. Once one person is already working on the file, it locks it. It locks the state of that particular infrastructure. So anybody that tries to initialize anything at that same moment, we get an error or we get a message that someone else is already working on this infrastructure. So that is one of the advantages of using the remote backend. Because for, like I said, for AWS, you have to use DynamoDB for state lock. But Azure, for Azure and GCP, it comes together with the blob storage. So it has been initialized. Let me do Terraform plan, Terraform plan. So we see the output of Terraform plan, and then we are going to confirm that our remote backend has been created on the portal in a short while. So let's just give it a sec while the Terraform plan works. Okay, so we run Terraform plan, and while we run Terraform plan, I wanted to show you something. So the first thing that happened when we ran Terraform plan is it said acquiring state lock. This may take a few minutes. So like I said, once you're using a remote backend, it does this state locking, and I've already explained what state locking means. So I'm not going to run this. I'm going to go to the portal and show something. So let me go to the resource group. Okay, let me go to the storage account, storage browser, blob container. And when I open this TF state, you can see the file that we created, that we defined as the key. So demo.terraform.tfstate. So it will use this file. This is what it will use as the state file. If you come to my VS Code, you can see that I don't have any TF states, just like unlike this other one that I have a terraform.tfstate file. The, the one I just did now, I don't have the terraform.tfstate file because it's using a remote backend, which is this particular file. So this is the way you can configure remote backend for Terraform. I mean, for the longest time, I always thought it was maybe something like a big thing to configure. So, but now you can see that it's something just really, really simple to actually configure when you're using Azure. So I'm not going to apply this. I'm not going to apply this because we've done this over and over and over again. The purpose of this particular video is to talk about the Terraform state file and how to actually, create a remote backend for your Terraform. So I hope you've been able to gain one or two things from this video. You can feel free to share this video to anyone who is interested, who is using Terraform, who wants to know about remote backend, how to do state lock and all of that. And I'll see you on the next video. Enjoy the rest of your day. Cheers.